Pursuit Of Podcast, a purely guest-centric show focusing on people and organizations that advance positive change. Positivity can be anywhere, and in a time of vast discord, the pursuit of is finding those who champion its causes loudest. Join us as we sit and learn about the pursuits of local leaders in their community. Let's go.
Hello, good people, and welcome to the Pursuit Of Podcast, where it's truly not us, it's you. I'm Ryan Buck, Artist Development, New Leonard Media. With me is the boss, Mark Wilson, President, New Leonard Media. How are you?
Hey, Ryan. How you doing? I'm
Good
well.
to see you. Good to see you.
Yeah.
That's enough of that. So our guest today is Geoff Streit, Board of Directors President for Homestretch Nonprofit Housing Corporation. How are you?
Good. Thank you guys for inviting me on today. I'm excited to be in the studio.
Thank you for being here. So for those who are unaware, what does Homestretch Housing do here in Traverse City?
So Homestretch Nonprofit Housing Corporation, and instead of the whole verbiage, I'm just going to call it Homestretch from here on out.
That's okay.
Homestretch is a 501c3 nonprofit housing corporation. So we are a developer of low to moderate income housing. We are a landlord of low to moderate income housing. And we are kind of what I would say an advocate for affordable housing in the northwestern region of Michigan. So our main primary focus has historically been Grand Traverse County, although we have a pretty strong presence in Leelanau County. We're in Benzie County as well, Manistee County, Antrim County. Basically, if there is a housing need that we can fit as long as it makes sense, and makes sense means a whole lot of things, we're interested. So Homestretch has been around roughly 25, 30 years.
And how long have you been serving?
I joined the board, I believe, about 5 years ago.
Wow.
The organization had fallen on some tough times. There was what's called a low-income housing tax credit project that the organization was involved in. That project drained a lot of financial and human resource out of the organization. The executive director at that time was kind of forced to resign by MSHDA, which is Michigan State Housing Development Association,
Right.
which is a funding and resource partner for us. And the organization Homestretch was being operated by Grand Traverse County at the time, specifically none other than Mean Jean Dorenzi. I don't know if she wants that nickname, but I love that. I love that woman. She had asked if I was interested to join the board. I said no. I will go to a meeting and listen. And then I spoke up, and then a couple months later, I found myself as the president of the board. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Good meeting.
No, just sometimes you just got to shut up, but sometimes you don't.
So it's about what you don't say sometimes rather than what you do say?
Correct.
Wow. So two key programs, one of which is a home ownership program. In order to do that, you receive assistance through special loans and grants, correct? That's
Correct.
part of it?
So our home ownership program is really kind of a hand-up kind of program. So, I mean, it is a helping hand, but the idea is we're kind of pulling somebody up to something they normally wouldn't be able to afford. So if you think about building a house, and let's pretend this house costs $200,000 to build, but a person who makes, $12 to $15 an hour can really only afford a house for $125,000.
Right.
Well, in Grand Traverse County, that eliminates probably about 90% of the housing options, other than some really beat up
It's a
homes.
significant number.
So we have to bridge that gap. So in the homeownership program, Homestretch looks to find what I like to call the funny money. So it's not necessarily our money. It might be government money from MSHDA. It might be some money from the county. It might be some money from, say, Rotary Charities. There's a lot of avenues that
helps
we'll look.
find the resources.
We help find the resource on the front end of the entire development and bake that in to the project and say, okay, this home that would normally sell market rate for $200, we're going to sell it for $125 to people that fit a certain criteria of income. And those income tables are published by MSHDA every year. And so then we try to help somebody that is of lesser means step into a home that they would otherwise not be able to afford. One of the features that I find pretty interesting about it is we have what's called a 15-year affordability clause. So, we used to have these 99-year affordability clauses. So if whatever happened, the house would always have to stay affordable on the home ownership side for 99 years. Well, that's okay, but if I'm in a house that I really can't make any money off of if I sell because that affordability clause would cap gains, then I'm really just a sexy renter for a long period of time. And so after a couple of years of really looking at it, we don't necessarily allow the person that owns it to capture all the equity. But after 15 years, if they've lived there that entire time and then they go to sell it, we remove that affordability component. And there's a step down basis. But what it does is that, that single parent with 3 kids that was really never going to grow wealth in this country, which homeownership has historically been a path to it. They're now in the program. They're able to, generate some dollars for themselves later on in life by, some amount of medium-term sacrifice.
And there is a process. There is a criteria.
Correct.
Specifically on the website, so if you're in the realm.
You would know on the front end if you're in the realm. In Grand Traverse County, and I'm going off of memory, a family of 4 would be roughly an income of under $50,000 or $45,000, somewhere there. So if you think about it, that's a single parent with 3 kids. That's a stay-at-home mom with a husband that works kind of tough jobs with 2 kids. And that's a lot of people.
So for somebody who's maybe not as informed, on the surface, you can look at this and look at a movie like The Big Short and be like, how is this different?
Sure. So, and I saw The Big Short a number of years ago. And so that has a lot to do with people that could get mortgages that couldn't afford those mortgages. So that was hype, speculation, and an overabundance of what I would consider liquidity chasing assets that aren't liquid. So a house, I can't go sell a house tomorrow, right? I mean, I can, but it's not like I can go take it and get cash tomorrow, right? Where it's like if I sell a stock or a bond or some of these things that have a market for them, I can go get cash. Well, you had all this cash chasing housing, and that drove up the prices. And then at the end, like, nobody really cared because they were just waiting for housing to keep going up. Yeah. So it's like, here's a loan, here's a loan. What we do is we make it affordable. We are looking at, we're looking at your income, we're looking at your historical, ability to earn, and we're not letting people get into something they can't afford because we're bringing the price down to something we know your housing cost is going to be limited of 30% of your take-home pay or something. Right. So historically, that ratio will allow a person to be safe financially from, they're still going to have hardships because, and their car will break down or, a kid gets sick or a water heater blows. But, when you're not spending, 50 and 60, 70% of your money on housing, you get a little more wiggle room. Yeah. And, people living off of 40,000, any little bit of stress can put these people over the edge. So The Big Short, we're definitely not approving everyone that could be like, I want a home. And you're like, oh, cool. You just, sure, have one.
Just in case people are not understanding that there are differences here. So you went to MSU. You studied finance and economics.
Go green.
Go white.
Yeah, baby.
And not being from here, I have no partiality to that point. Hooray, Michigan. But given your academic pursuits and what you do as a day job, because we're not talking about your day job, this is something that you spend your own time with. Is that a pretty good path to being successful on a board like this? Is a financial and economic background?
It doesn't hurt me. So the financial and economic background led me to wanting to be a Wall Street employee, work on Wall Street, work in that business. But life changes kind of threw me curveballs, and I ended up in a bank, which is great. And, now a credit union, everything's gone well professionally. And so a financial background can be helpful on any board. The banking, finance, and economics helps because I'm exposed to a lot of housing and real estate within my career. So that helps translate into a nonprofit housing corporation. However, we have board members with a legal background. We have board members that are, have been realtors. We have board members with a history in grant writing. So their history was just working in the nonprofit sector.
Right.
One of the board members that, what used to be on the board, A woman by the name of Sarah Lucas was kind of my housing hero. Like, she would be known in the area. There was a Networks Northwest would put on these large conferences every year, and she would be kind of the MC. That kind of transitioned her into a role in Housing North, but she was the board president before I joined, and just someone who is passionate about helping underserved people. And I had served on other boards and commissions in the past, but kind of meeting the more nonprofit-sided people was a very cool thing for me, and an experience where it opened up my kind of vision to say, like, oh, you know what? The people that just want to help people are, they're very valuable board members. Yeah. We've also had, some large private employers that the proprietor was on the board because they have a skin in the game of housing in our region. So
absolutely.
It doesn't hurt me.
But also with the board, that it's meant to be interdisciplinarian.
Correct.
And I think a good board is an eclectic mix of different perspectives. Which seems to be the case for you.
You do not want groupthink. I mean, I've been on boards that everyone is the same, cut of the same cloth, essentially. And some people have a very tough time dealing with opposing viewpoints. Some boards can be, very push or pull. But when you have people of a variety of backgrounds, I mean, it's just like diversity in the workplace. Yeah. The more of it, the richer we all are going to be.
And knowing that you all want the same thing. And hopefully personal agendas don't make their way to that board
and
meeting.
Bring toxicity to the board.
Yeah.
Right.
When you don't like somebody's idea and later on, now they don't like your idea because you didn't like theirs.
Right. I think dialogue is huge, trying to find understanding. And it does teach people how to, board service or, community service in general, it teaches us how to deal with things that aren't necessarily in our normal wheelhouse.
Right. So Homestretch also offers a rental program, correct?
Correct.
And so how does that work?
So similar to the home ownership program, we have income qualifications. So we look, you have to be, but we usually offer housing between 60 and 80% of AMI. AMI is area median income. And so some of the very low end, we have very subsidized housing on the very low end. So people with disabilities that are at 20 and 40% of AMI. So these are people that don't work and they get the Social Security check of $1,200 a month. Well, $14,000 a year is not going to go that far. So there are organizations in our region. Goodwill helps work with them. There's a couple of other ones, and they work with what I would call the impoverished, where we're working more with that working poor, or, the term now is the missing middle, right? So It's like the lower middle class that can see a route, but they just can't get there.
I've noticed a change in nomenclature. Working poor
is not the phrase
come
anymore.
Off derogatory.
Right? So now it's the missing middle.
And not it's, like we're trying to tap dance with words, but...
Correct. And so we look at a technical number that's published through HUD to MISHDA. So HUD, the Housing Urban Development from the federal government, goes to these state governments and say, here's kind of the housing guidelines. And then those housing associations, in Michigan, it's MISHDA, they will publish a table that has a homeownership AMI table and a rental AMI table. So we'll focus on that 60 to 80% AMI. We've had other ones that go up to 100% AMI because, in all honesty, our region, it seems like the table hasn't caught up. So a family of 4 in Grand Traverse County living off of $50,000, it's just not that feasible. The housing costs, the taxes, the accoutrement of just going outside.
Are you working with building owners to help with, or how's that work?
So we rent buildings we've developed. So we are more than happy to work with owners. We don't property manage for other people. So what we do is we will go into a project looking to make it affordable. And like I said before, there's funny money to help us do that. There's, historically MISHDA had what was called home funds. Other charitable organizations that want to tackle housing, they would look to us to be possibly a conduit for that money to help. I mean, to build a house, whether we build it or another, like a for-profit local builder, the materials are going to cost the same. We're going to pay the same guys doing drywall. We're going to pay the same guys laying flooring. So the cost to build a house is the same, but we want to be able to offer it at a cheaper amount, and we're willing to take a skinny rate of return. we've got to protect our investment, but we don't have to do much more than that. So we don't need a huge profit, but to even make it affordable is we have to really buy down that cost. And a way to do that is, obviously charitable or grant funds. A huge way to do that is what's called the LIHTC program, Low Income Housing Tax Credit. And that program essentially gives the developer a giant fee based on these tax credits to incentivize you to build this affordable housing, and you keep it affordable for 15 or 30 years. But this giant fee basically gives you a bunch of profit today, and then the housing cost is bought down because these tax credits are essentially sold to other investors, and that money comes in, and instead of the apartment costing, it still costs $3 million, but now we have like $1.5 million of tax credits. So now we're really only floating the debt on half of it, which then it's like, oh, now we can open it up to people that can afford it. And so those tax credits are provided by the federal government.
This will be our most cerebral episode thus far. I think the liquidity line is going to go down in history. That's going to be a game changer for us.
Oh, boy.
And not to be lost, who has access to something like that?
So essentially everybody to be a developer, but not really. So it's like there are for-profit LIHTC developers and there's nonprofit LIHTC developers. We've done a couple LIHTC projects. We do not hold ourselves out as like the only one. And in all honesty, the next ones we would look to do, we would look to partner with a more experienced for-profit developer because you're filling out government forms.
Yeah.
And it sounds easy.
I was gonna ask a question about
Go
that.
ahead.
So these other organizations with the funny money,
Sure.
they look to you to help direct traffic so that they know that it's going to the right place.
They
Is
would
that
say,
correct?
hey, we want to do something to impact housing. And we would say, hey, we're a nonprofit housing developer. So as a developer, we're the landowner. We're also the general contractor. So we go in and general contract the build. We build it, our subs, they build it, and then we own and operate it. But that funny money would be to ensure that housing is affordable.
And then so the builder, those working have to have a specific accreditation or certification to do this, or no?
No, not the tradespeople don't.
Are they required to pay Davis-Bacon prevailing wages?
In certain regions, they are in Michigan. So certain LIHTC deals have prevailing wages. So a Detroit deal, a Southeast Michigan deal, some of the Grand Rapids ones.
But those get fit into the bid. So actually that's
Correct.
good for like trades workers in the area that when
Right.
you're doing this, because you're going to get paid well to build
An affordable housing
this.
thing that...
And then to back up to where you said the missing middle, the people who can see the light at the end of the tunnel but aren't quite there.
Sure.
Confirm if this is like the correct analogy, if I make it personal for a moment. So I finished school. I had a young child. I had a baby, and I was single.
Preach, baby.
And I got a job, and in my field, and I was working. And after my first year, I got a raise.
Okay.
And that raise was just enough to put me over the hump for daycare assistance. So I got booted off of that.
Sure.
But the raise wasn't enough to cover that difference. So
Right.
like it actually would have been better for me to ask
To stay
to
poor,
not,
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did find an organization, I'll shout out to Michigan 4Cs. It was a one-time, one-year grant
Okay.
for people in my situation
Sure.
that covered it. And then the following year when I got a raise again, then I
that
was
would
able,
be a
I was
person that
back.
might fit the bill because they may be below where we'd even target. That person might be a 40% AMI. So they're going to have, a specific kind of housing provider, and maybe they could be the missing middle. What a lot of it tends to be is people that never were on the assistance that, now they're stuck in a job that's paying $32,000 a year, $38,000 a year, and it's a consistent job. They might enjoy it. They may not have any skills to better themselves or get more money essentially for their labor.
Okay.
And so what we find is you do get a lot of people that have this consistent employment or in a field that just doesn't pay a lot, like journalism, for example. Like you might have someone that's been working at a news station for 10 years. They love their job because they're on TV and it's a lot of fun, but a regional news person in Traverse City, Michigan they're not making huge bank.
They're not making Ron Burgundy money.
They're not making Ron Burgundy cash. And so they're, probably making maybe 30-some thousand a year. And if they've got a kid, the area median income tables really start making sense when you have kids. And there are situations where there's a single person that might make, $35,000 a year, and they fit that bill and they can buy or rent a house, which is great because as they get older, they've locked in, but it also doesn't force them to necessarily have to do a job that they hate. So I don't know if that answers your missing middle question.
Well, yeah, it helps them so that they're not called the golden handcuffs.
Right. Correct.
Where you're doing one thing, but you can't ever explore anything else because you can't afford the pay cut that it'll take.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, the missing middle is somewhat the people that they make too much to get assistance from the traditional sense, but they don't make enough to make a life. Yeah. And so that's a huge swath of America. It's a huge swath of Michigan, and unfortunately, it's growing.
Yep.
That's not shrinking.
And so you are here to help people like that to start to create wealth. In owning a home, there's a point of pride. You mentioned it can be a bummer and your car can break down, your siding can start to fall off, but at the end of the day, you have a home and you're raising your family or whatever.
The siding stays on. Quality build.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And that leads me to, I don't want to be lost on the notion that you are building homes.
We're building homes, we're building townhomes, we're building apartments, and these are quality builds.
Yeah.
For example, in Traverse City, something you can see, and, well, if you knock on the door, maybe a homeowner will let you in. So by the filling station on Woodmere, there's a development that has these little homes, and then there's these townhome condominiums, they look like. So Homestretch partnered with Habitat. Habitat did all the single-family, tiny builds. They're regular-sized home, but that's a neighborhood. In Habitat, they have a different business model.
Dude, I love that little community, too, if you know what we're talking about.
And so those newer-looking townhomes, Homestretch built those in 2 phases. I believe that was 16 units. We did 8 and 8. So it took a long time, and that was the first project that I was a part of because that was the deal that blew up the organization prior to the board reforming. I love to point that out because it's a new and it's a modern looking piece of property. It's well maintained and the quality of construction was sound.
That's awesome. Wow. So you've been in finance since 2005-ish.
I think so.
I think about that.
Oh, God. I'm feeling old now.
In your current role at Forefront Credit Union, is it accurate to say that you specialize in working with small business owners that have a story to tell?
Always.
So what's a good story to tell?
Right now? Oof, that's tough. I mean, it's tough because Michigan has had a real tough COVID time. Death rates, I get all that, infections. The challenge is our state where we live is completely different than where the politicians, the policymakers, and the majority of wealth in this state is. But we are dealing with the policies of people 4 hours away, 3.5 hours away, 3 hours away, whatever way you want to take the freeway. The good stories are that our region from a housing standpoint, and if you're in real estate as an investor or a landlord, it's been wonderful. Yep. I mean, people are flocking here. They want to be here, and this is a beautiful area to live. So our downtown retailers, some of them have had some tougher, some better years than this, and some of them are surviving. I feel for all the businesses that have shuttered or have had to make real tough sacrifices and changes. For every, really sad story right now in northern Michigan, there's a really exciting story of, somebody who figured out a different way to do something. I look in our area of, for example, all the distilleries, day one got into making hand sanitizer, which was cool. And they were all giving it away to start, and they figured out a way to make some money. But it was hey, we're not making any money from tasting rooms. We got to figure this out, and shame on the government for then sending them a bill, which I know has kind of been worked through.
Right.
So you've got some really exciting stories like that. You've seen, one of my favorites, and I'll give him a shout out, Common Good Bakery on 14th Street. It's a bakery. It's excellent baked goods, but what would they do in COVID? People can still purchase, but when stores weren't allowed to open, they switched to curbside only. And so what they did is they moved all their product to the front, which already had windows, and employed an online ordering app, and you put your car color in, you pull up, they come right out. So there was no handling of money. Right. Everything was online, And then they also started selling, remember the toilet paper scare of 2020?
Gosh.
So a lot of, which
People
was
probably
crazy.
still with pallets of it.
So they were selling, their orders from whether it was Cisco or GFS or their big supplier. So you could get on their online ordering, you could order a croissant, a breakfast sandwich, and a 96 roll case of toilet paper. Or you could buy one roll of toilet paper at a time. And he was never running out because he had the commercial line coming through.
Right.
You could buy a case, a flat of eggs, where normally, you'd go to the store for those couple weeks or, get online. There's no eggs, there's no cheese, there's no butter. He was selling staples. And so he innovated and found a really great way to stay open and actually have a pretty successful year.
And it's all legit, correct?
Oh, the toilet paper wipes my butt as good as any toilet paper. No, it's all legit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nothing that precludes him from selling that based on being a bakery.
Correct. He talked to his supplier and he innovated in a way that was at that time was opportune. And the people are already coming there. So it's like, well, why don't I pick up a roll of toilet paper for $1, which is like, okay, yeah, that might be expensive for.
Now, what's funny is like pre-COVID, a free roll of toilet paper with something that you're eating
would be hilarious.
would be like,
I think
what's that
that
say
would
about
be
the
great
product?
under just normal circumstances. I guess it doesn't say much about what they think's going to happen after you eat it, but
Yeah.
So there was a lot of fun stories, and there's a lot of success of and I
Well, it
love
was
people
a
with
lot
stories.
of innovation and agility
And
and
we saw that.
resilience.
And
Resilience.
we're Michiganians. I don't know what the word is. I know it's the last governor
Ganders.
call this the
Ganders?
Michiganders. I know that people in general are resilient and they will do their best to get through times, and they're going to keep trying. And it's tough because I'm not I guess in some of the legislation, people in banks are considered, credit unions are considered frontline workers. I don't see myself as that because I'm not saving lives. But I look at people and I'm like, man, I wish, our politicians could see the people suffering in the way they do and watching decades of their life poured into it.
If it's okay to point out,
Go ahead.
like, you said you work for a credit union already, and I happen to know that you've been getting up very early because of the passing of the next stimulus and with the PP.
round 2, yeah.
And in some ways, people would say that is saving lives. You're really helping.
Also providing
Thank you.
shelter,
Getting it.
which is a basic
I mean-
human necessity.
So when the shutdowns happened and the government rolled out these loan programs last time around, the kids were at home for, that was when they were doing like 20 minutes a day of online school every other day when the schools kind of didn't have a plan. And so they're at home and dad sat at the kitchen table for 13 to 16 hours a day for a while. And I'm just like, guys, here's the story. We don't know what's going to happen. We're doing our best to help as many people as we can. We're not going to help everybody, but this is a sacrifice we're making. Like, we don't get to hang out and have fun and go out. Like, I know a lot of people that they had a lot of time to personally grow. I just clicked buttons all day and took phone calls and texts and emails, and it was stressful. And I look back and I'm like, it was the right thing to do. And I hope it helped a couple people. And, if it's just like when we volunteer to help kids, right? As long as we make a good, change one kid's life, and you kind of give yourself a pat on the back. So we're trying to do our best, and, we can help. So we're going to try. Is it effective? Is it the right way to help? I mean, that's a whole philosophical conversation, but with the resources we have, we're doing our best.
And, affordable housing is such an issue here, and I think has been for a long time.
Yeah.
So in your estimation, is this an issue that can be progressively helped, or is it just kind of fingers in an endlessly cracked dam that hopefully will hold?
Well, from a long-term perspective, and I'm talking 20 to 50 years, my belief is inherently that the market itself will help solve some of these things. Now, does that sound good if I'm a waitress working 2 jobs, or even not working right now, but if I was working normally 2 jobs just to make ends meet for my couple kids? And, no, I don't want to hear that, like, the market will solve things over a long period of time. I mean,
Right.
Societies have come and gone, but human civilization has kept going. So I have a belief that housing will continue to be more accessible for people and there will be more options. But the reality is in the short run and in the medium term, we have to make intentional steps. And in this sense, relying on some government assistance, relying on, the charitable donations of others or programs out there. Will it get better in Traverse City in the short term? I sincerely hope so, but the math and the reality would say it probably won't.
Right.
I got to ask a quick question. Does Homestretch build stick-built, or is there prefabbed homes?
We've built stick-built historically.
Okay.
We have looked at some prefab options. We've not done any panelized construction at this point, or modular or mobile homes.
Okay.
So our builds are stick built.
All
So
right.
we're building one on 8th Street right now, which is Dr. Smyka's office parking lot. So that kind of 2-story L-shaped apartment, if you've driven by there by the cemetery.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're building that right
yeah.
now.
Nice.
Stick built.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Which-
just trying to look at like the longevity of these, because sometimes
Sure.
I feel like that's part of the housing problem too.
Is the
that
trap of a poorly built home.
some of these paper mache houses that I
Correct.
grew up in the 80s are
Right.
like throwaway houses today. Like
So
they're
one of my
not worth
first jobs in
salvaging.
banking had to do with like really odd collections work, and a guy made a bunch of money bringing beat up mobile homes all across the country to Hurricane Katrina victims.
Yeah.
And these are homes that like
I remember that.
they would blow down in a normal gust. You always have people willing to help solve a problem, snake oil salesmen, charlatans, if they will. But we are building quality built homes. We are looking at more what I would call zero environmental impact build. One of our board members, Sarna Salzman, executive director at Seeds, a local nonprofit who is passionate about this, brings that to the table where we're trying to say, yes, we're going to build quality built, zero emission or these things that are very important to people. And I really like that we're looking at that. So quality is key.
So you touched on this earlier. It's very clear. Local news, real estate market in Traverse City is exploding. Another $1 billion, another $1 billion plus year, right?
Sure.
December 2020 was the best in history. It was the best year since 2016. All that. How heavily are you tied to the current state of real estate, or are you kind of insulated from that?
On all angles, I'm pretty heavily involved. So I finance a lot of real estate at the credit union. So we do a lot of real estate financing, whether it's investment property or commercial property. And then, obviously people doing mortgages. We're seeing the housing business. I work with a lot of realtors. And then on Homestretch, we see that effect. So now,
But more, is Homestretch affected as much
in
by...
a sense, it is, because it drives the cost of land up, right? And so if we're going to develop, we're going to buy a piece of property that somebody else owns. Essentially, we have to buy the land from a current owner. And so if their option is, well, I could be charitable and sell it to Homestretch at a reasonable cost, or I'm going to look at a 2020 speculative cost. I want that money. It smells real good. It feels real nice in your hands. So we are affected. And so it does create, a little bit more pencil sharpening and negotiating. And our executive director, and forgive me for waiting this long to say his name, John Stimpson, is an amazing executive director of the organization. His ability to make partnerships and bridge gaps and bring other people to the table has been phenomenal with the way we're looking at trying to keep this organization going. So some of that is really required, and people understand it's a need.
Yeah.
The challenge is, we can have so many people clamoring that it's a need, and only so few people will do something about it.
Sure. And you mentioned the project on 8th Street. Any other projects you can talk about that are current or upcoming?
So we've got a project here close to the studio. So the one on 8th Street, Oakwood Townhomes, it's a 6-unit multifamily. We've got an 8-unit going up in honor that we're working with the township. On Fern Street, again, a lot of these are in that Traverse Heights neighborhood where land was cheap when we bought it, or we're able to get in on the deal. We're looking at a duplex. However, with recent zoning changes in the works, we may be able to put more units on it. So we're still bound by local governmental ordinances.
Carver.
So Carver, we're looking at a 10-unit property. We've got a 10-unit. We're looking at it in Leelanau County. And if you looked at the ticker recently, the Traverse City Business News ticker, we're actually working with Lormac Stern, the developer of the former Kmart in Acme. So we're looking to put a 30-unit...
Saw the story. You're a part of that.
...affordable housing piece in it. And so that's us I think originally, like, John and I had both read an article about Lormax Stern taking over the Kmart, and I had emailed one of the people there to set up a meeting, and he had emailed another person there to set up a meeting. And then it's like, we're coming at them from every way, trying to be like, hey, they talked about affordable housing when they bought it. So like, oh, hey, we're putting our hand up. We want to jump in. We want to figure out how to partner.
And how to do it, and you can.
And we know how to do it. And there's a lot of other organizations in town doing a lot of great work. Goodwill has done a lot of good work with housing. Traverse City Housing Commission and Tony Lenti over there, he's done a phenomenal job working with other for-profit and nonprofit organizations to move the needle. And it's going to take, it's like raising a child. It takes a village.
Right.
And we're not going to solve this. I understand people use the word crisis. Unfortunately, it's repercussions of just the nature of the world that we live in. And so we've got to figure it out.
Right. Well, there are ways to contribute. There are ways to donate.
There are.
In very unique ways, correct?
We have a couple. So, financially, we always will take some money.
Can you go to the website for that?
If you can't, we will. I think maybe we could put out contact information, but I believe at the website we have contact information, so you can
homestretchhousing.org.
homestretchhousing.org. And so because we do have contact information, you can get on there and reach out to us to provide a donation, which we would very much appreciate. And we are a nonprofit, so it is tax deductible. If you are a landowner or a property owner, there are some interesting ways that you could donate or partially donate your property. There are also some certain tax advantages that you could take advantage of. If you were to gift us use of the land, let's say you had a big piece of property and you were going to do something on one portion and you wanted to gift us the other portion, there's some huge benefits there. And then another big way people can help is to be an advocate. So when you see, whether it's a Homestretch or a Traverse City Housing Commission or a Goodwill or another organization, a Housing North, that's looking to work on affordable housing, speak up. Because the old mantra of these Section 8 towers, people think Cabrini Green. When they think affordable housing, they think Cabrini Green in Chicago. Yep. It's a giant tower where it's...
That's where I'm from. I remember.
Those buildings aren't even there anymore. I remember it was a few years ago.
It's a very gentrified neighborhood
They
now.
got torn down. And so people have this misnomer that affordable housing is the ghetto, and I'm
blight.
using air quotes right here, or it's a blight, or there's crime and poverty, when in the fact is these are the people you see every single day. These are the people at the grocery store. These are the people that are serving your food at your favorite restaurants. These are the people that are driving your kids to school on buses. These are people that are the fabric of our community, and we can't forget about them. So be an advocate if you can't do anything else.
And, with the aforementioned housing project in a much larger city and a much older project, one could say that it was actually like a failed project through trial and error, through our own social experiment as a nation.
It feels like Homestretch is invested. You're not just building it and forgetting it. You're here in the community. It's hard to not see those people at the grocery store.
These are in. I always had a soft spot for single moms. Hey, no, everyone gets a laugh out of that. But the reality is I've been a single parent and I get the struggle. And when I'm fortunate and I can help people, I do. And when I'm not, I understand the plight. And from a personal perspective, I'm a complete, I'm pretty much an anarchist. I want no government involved in the lives of people because I truly believe the long-term economic incentive for people is to be kind, honest, truthful, and good business people. Like, we're all going to do the right thing because in the long term, that's going to make me better off.
Right.
Because you're not going to come out to try to get revenge, right? So other than that, though, I know that if I want my community to be better, I got to take part in it. Like, I can't just sit back and point fingers and blame and do nothing. So
I think that's why we live in a smaller community, is the fact that we can.
It's a great place to be a part of.
And you don't have distance as an excuse. You don't have time as an excuse necessarily. I think that's amazing. The website is homestretchhousing.org. Great website. All the information if you want to apply. Are you taking any current applications?
We're always taking current applications. So that's like the tail or the head, right? So people are always reaching out to us to have housing, and we may not have any available at that time. But as we build our lists and have demand, one, if there's an opening, we're going through applicants. 2, because it's a somewhat arduous screening process and people who feel like they might fit, they may not. So it's like the more people we have, but it also helps us push us and say, oh, shoot, we've got 45 people that want housing that all qualify, that are already in our purview. We got to find something to do.
Right.
So
That's motivation.
it's motivation, and we are very motivated right now.
That's incredible. And again, opportunities to donate, you can find on the website. If you have a home, if you have land, please reach out, homestretchhousing.org. Geoff, thank you so much for your pursuits.
Thank you, guys.
To all those who pursue along with you, helping people find a home with dignity, giving them a place to live, maybe work, maybe raise a family. This is amazing. Thank you so much. And everybody, thank you all for listening and for pursuing the positive.
Hey, thanks again for joining us on the Pursuit of Podcast. One more time, that's homestretchhousing.org. Stop in, show your support, spread the love, advocate. And also, we want to give a shout out to our supporters, Urban Meds in Traverse City, Michigan. That's at hnmwellnessstore.com. And also to Tin Lid Hat Company. That's tinlidco.com. Use promo code ThePursuitOf for both websites. Special discounts to our listeners. We'll see you next week.